and welcoming everybody to what we've called, hang on, I just got to look it up, Common Law Court Galactic Emissary, and I'll explain that as we go along. I was on a Zoom call last Sunday, totally out of the blue, didn't know it was coming, and it was a guy explaining how to fill out this rather special affidavit, and the affidavit was a soul-based affidavit, so quite unusual, and that resonates with the ideas that we work with, the metaphysics. I think I've quoted a number of times a special quote about an awakened species always uses metaphysics, and humans in an unawakened state do not. And so that tells me that the idea of a soul is important, whereas a lot of people will deny the existence of the soul and base just about everything that they do on the material level. But you know, I think most of us here on the screen are of the view that we are far more than the material objects, the bodies, and even the mind. We're not the mind either. I could actually go in deep into yoga philosophy on that, and the mind is actually part of nature. It's not part of spirit. Yeah, so I was impressed with that affidavit, and I contacted him, second or third hand. I've never spoken to him, and he agreed to be on tonight. And you know, if he turns up, that's great. If he doesn't matter. In fact, I'll just check the emails, because maybe he's having a problem. A couple of us had problems getting on. Won't take a second. No, hasn't come through. So we'll just proceed. From what I can gather, he's doing many presentations, all on Zoom, and he was doing Tuesday, Thursday. He's also doing Sunday. I'll continue. So the guy was doing many presentations. If anybody wants to get onto his Sunday presentation, send me a message, and I can send you, or I might be able to put it in the group chat a bit later or something like that. I was actually quite impressed with what he had to say. It was 3 hours worth, and he might have a bit of a reputation. I don't know hardly anything about him, so it's up to our discretion to look into it. As well as the soul name that he was suggesting that we choose, I've changed to, if you can see me on the Zoom, you'll see a new name, and it doesn't, instead of George now, it says Information, right? And you can call me In if you like, and that's what I've selected for a soul name.
Hi, In.
Sorry?
I said hi, In.
Well, Information.
Yeah.
I consider myself, hang on, Elspeth is joining. I consider myself a soul in formation, right? That's part of our existence. We are, there's a definition of soul which comes out of one of the spiritual books, and it says that the soul is the sum total of all your experiences. And so we're talking about all our incarnations becomes the soul. And there are definitions in the hypnotherapy world about young souls and old souls and everything in between, right? So obviously an old soul is someone who's had many incarnations, if that's what their journey is all about. And a young soul has only had a few, and they're not terribly experienced in some ways of interacting with each other. And our journey is to get into the old soul realm, and that can take hundreds, even thousands, and I've also heard of hundreds of thousands of lifetimes. There's heaps of information which I've accessed on that particular topic. Right, so what I was going to say to Alex, I mean, he's focusing a lot on the legal aspect and bringing soul into it. And I was going to ask him, or I was going to suggest to him that tonight, if he's giving a presentation, it'll be slightly different. He's got plenty of other presentations where he's presenting the nuts and bolts about the affidavits and a whole bunch of things. Whereas what we'd like to do tonight is look at something different, and that is why he's calling himself a galactic emissary, right? And that might be self-explanatory. He's a soul in training, and the affidavit actually brings that topic up, that he's been in other incarnations, and possibly on different planets. And so being an emissary, he's taking a journey through the galaxy. I would also add in there, why not intergalactic? And you could even go further and say, well, why not interdimensional as well? And the more we find out about existence and who we are, the more we realize what we don't know. I'm sure you've all heard that idea before. And so I tell my yoga students, when they think I've got some information, I just say I know nothing. Compared to the mysteries of the universe, I know nothing. And I think that's true, right? You don't have to know it all to live this life. Part of the journey is to come to an awareness of who we really are. And you don't have to know, let's say, for example, if you need to run down the street, you don't have to know which muscles are doing it for you, right? So you don't have to figure out all the material-based ideas in order to run down the street or just about anything else you do, right? You just trust that the being, the body that you've chosen to work with knows how to do those sort of things. Yeah, so that way we don't have to overload ourselves with information. In terms of Galactic Emissary, which I mentioned before, there's plenty of information on galactic and intergalactic beings, other dimensional entities. One of the fascinating ones, let's see if you can see that. It's a book called Abduction to the Ninth Planet, and it's got another title, The Theuba Prophecy. Some of you might have heard of it.
Which one?
It's, to me, it's one of the most incredible books of all time, and it's about, according to the information, it's about a race which is the most advanced, both technologically and spiritually, in the galaxy, right? And
What's the name of the
because
book? Sorry, what's the name of the book?
it's Abduction to the Ninth Planet,
Cool.
but it's also known as the Theuba Prophecy. Now, it's interesting that Theuba, and Theos, it's one of the main characters from that race in the book, corresponds to the Greek word for Theos, which means God. So maybe they are the gods, right? And in the book, it describes, it makes reference to biblical situations where the writers of the Bible consider their experiences to be supernatural, divine, and all this sort of thing, but it's actually the Theubans. Possibly. Well, you know, I'm not making any claims, but that's what the book describes. It's actually the Theubans, and because they've advanced to such a high level, they know how to skip across time and space, and they monitor what's going on in the galaxy, and they look after a lot of races. You know, there's other information which tells us that there's probably tens of thousands of different humanities in this galaxy alone, right? And you know, maybe they don't bother about going to other galaxies because galaxies are so spread out. You know, they're so far away. You know, even this galaxy is something like, what, 200,000 light years across? Is that right? Some incredible figure. And there's trillions of stars. There's more stars in the Milky Way than there are grains of sand on the planet, on this planet. So that's the kind of the immensity of this galaxy alone. And it does come up in the metaphysical, spiritual writings that the question is asked, well, is there a likelihood of other life in the universe? And maybe there is other life in the universe. And the response is, well, there's no chance of not being any other life in the universe at all. There's got to be other life in the universe. And other information that we work with, you know, it's not just books, but a bunch of movies that we've shown here in our cinema is telling us that a lot of these races are actually on this planet. They've traveled across time and space because they've evolved to the point where they can do that. And it's interesting that the human race is getting to that point where we will be able to master both time and space and energy. We must be pretty close, right? Oops, somebody's disappeared. Yeah, we must be pretty close to that, but there is an issue with that. If we evolve technologically without evolving spiritually, then we'll become a more or less a machine planet. And I think we'd all agree that machines have got no empathy. And so that could be rather dangerous for us. We'll be controlled to the nth degree. And, you know, I might have mentioned that the lockdown itself is the beginnings of that. and I don't know if it's good news, but it looks like possibly the majority of the population is going along with that story.
It's bad news. It's bad news.
Yeah. Well, I'm not judging it. I'm just saying, well, it looks like that's what people are choosing. And one of the most advanced texts that we've been using is saying that that's exactly what's happening on the planet right now. Now,
what text is that, George, that talks about that?
Okay, it's the Conversations with God,
Oh,
but number 4.
number 4.
Now, book number 4 appeared on the planet in 2017. That's when it was published, whereas books 1, 2, and 3 were published in the 1990s. And book number 4 was a big surprise to the author, because he says he had not channeled for about 10 years. And all of a sudden, he was woken up at 4:20 a.m., right? He said that in the old days, he was always woken up at 4:20 a.m. so that he could write. And it hadn't happened for about 10 years.
4:20.
He was woken at 4:20 a.m. and he instantly knew that he had to write. And in the conversation, he says to the God entity, whatever that might be, well, why are you coming to us now? I thought you didn't have an agenda, you know, because if you read books 1, 2, and 3, the God energy is the creator, but it's also an energy that gives us free will, and that's how we can demonstrate our creativity, right? So we are also gods according to that formula. If we were bossed around by God, there's no point in having that kind of relationship, and you'll probably find that many of the world's religions separate themselves from God. God is out there somewhere, whereas the Conversation with God material acknowledges that God is within. And basically, that's the reason for our existence. We're actually gods in formation, right? We're already gods, right? Actually, we just don't realize it, right? We're already in paradise. You just have to remember that. Okay. But that's an exciting journey. It's like an adventure, right? And that's the only reason why we're here. You know, if you're in the divinity, if you're in divine bliss, why would you choose to come down to this realm where you experience all sorts of difficulties in your life? And according to the information, we deliberately forget who we are. And that way, we can have the opportunity to remember who we are and be the creator that we are. Right? So there's a big difference between knowing yourself as a concept and actually experiencing it. And that's the only reason for the material to exist. Right? It's a very deep concept, but it's actually explained in the first couple of chapters of the book 1, which came out in 1995. Right? So what I found when I did the study, when we did the study books for book 4, I found that if people had not didn't have an appreciation of book 1 or 2, they didn't understand book 4, right? So if you do want to get into book 4, the more advanced stuff, you probably need to start with book 1. And I bought another bunch of book 1s here if people want to. Sorry?
You could start with book 2 because it refers a lot to book 1.
Yeah, you could start with book 2 because that was 1996 and book 3 was 1997.
Yeah,
According to
right.
the information, it's the most advanced message from divinity ever. Right, so don't take it from me.
I actually started listening to the audio books while I was driving, like, because you put me onto them. Yeah, but I haven't got as far as book 4. I've only got 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And there's also Communion with God. It's an excellent book about the illusions of man. And
is that one of his as well?
yeah, and we
Yeah, right.
audio. It's great, when we take our trips to and from the land, we listen to all of them, and yeah, it tells us a lot. It tells us a lot about the intergalactic and the galactic spheres. It tells us a lot about malevolent and benevolent species, because what happens is, oh yeah, that's right. I'll just return to the question. Yeah, Neil Donald Walsh asks the entity that he's communicating with, God it's called itself, why are you here now? What? I thought you didn't have an agenda. And God answers, well, actually, you asked me for help, and that's why I'm here. There's enough of you on the planet right now which is saying, help, we're in a mess. And that's why the book number 4 came out. So yeah, it's a good idea to have an appreciation of 1, 2, and 3, or even just book 1 before we get started on book 4, because it does go into more advanced realms. I'll just give you a little bit of a rundown of what book 4 covers in some ways. It does say that we can't bury our heads in the sand. You have to know what it is that you want to change. If you see disharmony outside of yourself, if you have a see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil attitude, it doesn't work, right? Because you're not in a position to bring it out into the open and discuss ways to change it. The earlier books go into the tools of creation. It's this 3 tools of creation, and that's thought, word, and deed, right? So everything, when we think about it, everything that we create must start with a thought, right? So that's what powers creation. It starts with a thought, but if you only stop there, then you're just a dreamer. You have to go further. On the other end of the scale, if you're doing action, the deed part of it, and you don't have thought that goes into that, no vision, let's say, then you become very busy, but you don't actually create anything, right? So there's no point in going down that track as well. And then the central part of that is word, and to me that's communication, right? We need to communicate, and that's why we don't bury our heads in the sand. And you need all those 3 aspects in order to be effective as a creator, thought, word, and deed. And when I did some research on that, I did some research on what the most effective entrepreneurs on earth do to create what they're doing. And they've called it vision, passion, and action, right? So it's very similar. Vision is thought. Passion is their equivalent for word. Maybe they're communicating with everybody about it, and then action becomes the deed. So, it's not just a flimsy idea out of an airy-fairy spiritual book. It's what the world's greatest achievers actually use to create things. And you'll find it on the internet if you ever want to have a look. Well, just a little bit more on book 4. It covers that we're at a stage, humanity is at a stage where it can evolve 2 different ways, technologically and spiritually. It's supposed to be a balance of the 2. One of the quotes from the book is saying an awakened species has a balance between metaphysics and cosmology. No, that's not right. Technology and cosmology. Okay. The technology will take our physical bodies to the stars, and the cosmology will do it on a spiritual basis. Right? We're not out there to invade other planets, and like the Theubans do, we might be on a mission to help other planets, help them develop, without interfering with their free will. That's not allowed either. It's one of the divine laws, let's say. So, yeah, that's a strong feature of the books. Because there's so many humanities in the galaxy, a lot of them have advanced to that stage where they're either technological or they're spiritual or they've got the balance, right? And the technological only races are malevolent races, right? They, because there's no empathy in the way they operate, people, it's kind of a violent kind of existence. You're absolutely controlled, and you can't, you don't have any freedoms, right? The machines are controlling it, and there might be a small group of individuals who are somehow directing the machines to do this, that, and the other. It's probably the technophiles. Yeah. And then, so there's actually lots and lots of malevolent species, and there's actually lots and lots of benevolent species, which have also got to that level. And the malevolent species have got the technology to come to Earth and invade us. And there's something that stops them from doing that. I might have mentioned this before to some of you. The malevolent species cannot invade us because there are beings in higher dimensions. They've transcended the physical, right? So, I can't give you a rundown of all those dimensions. We don't have to know about it. But they're on a higher plane, and they will prevent the malevolent species from invading us. In the media, Hollywood, and you'll see it all over the internet and Facebook and all that. There's announcements about alien invasions and things like that. Well, according to this information, it doesn't happen, right? The reason it doesn't happen, the reason it's prevented, is because it would upset the free will that we've been given on this planet, right? We're kind of an isolated race, and the whole idea of humans on the planet is like an experiment to see if we can evolve to the next level, right? So, if we don't evolve to the next level, we might destroy ourselves, right? And we do have quite a bit of information saying that we've been through several of those scenarios before. Yeah, one of the most extreme I've heard of is a very advanced human race on this planet got so out of control with its technology that it actually shattered the planet, right, and broke it up into pieces. Fortunately, there was enough gravity left to pull the planet back together, but it was a complete annihilation of that of the life on the planet at the time. Can't give you any timelines. Could have been billions of years ago. And of course, we don't have any records. So we're just going on, you could even say we're going on hearsay. It's up to you to decide whether it's got any validity or not. But it kind of makes sense to me, you know, and that's what we were saying before. Do we really know what's going on in the bigger existence? No, not really. And the more you find out, the more you find out you don't know. Right? And so if we have a species that comes onto the Earth and starts taking over, that's interfering with our free will. The benevolent species, on the other hand, they don't interfere with our free will either, but they might inspire us. Right? According to Book 4 again, they're doing that all the time. Right? They actually, we think we're thinking original thoughts most of the time, but nearly all the time, those thoughts are just memories. The thoughts that we have, the creative thoughts, usually come from a higher source, a higher dimension. There's other material which also says, and this is rather bizarre, that there are also races living within the Earth which are way more advanced than we are. And we don't have any contact with them, not in the general sense anyway. And the reason they don't contact us is because we're still too violent. And it would be of danger to them if they contacted us. And the most comprehensive information I've seen from that is the Telos books, where the Telos people, they've probably got several, let's call them cities around the Earth, but they're generally underground. And they are the remnants of the Lemurian race. The Lemurian race got to a very high level, spiritually and technologically, apparently, but there was a destructive element there as well. And eventually, nearly all the population was annihilated through catastrophes that were triggered through the consciousness. You know, a natural catastrophe is consciousness driven, from what I can understand from the information. But there was a big enough percentage of the, well, it's a very small percentage of the original population which were on the higher levels of evolution, and they knew that their race was on the way to destruction, and so they exited out of the general living conditions, and they set up a city which is supposed to be under Mount Shasta in California, of all places. There's lots of information on it, and in a way, they are one of the benevolent species that are helping us along. And they're actually surprised that we're still, according to the information, they're actually quite surprised that we still haven't woken up. Oh well, we just can't tell whether we're going to wake up or not. It's pot luck in some ways. The consciousness at the moment on the planet is is quite mesmerized by technology. It becomes a god in itself, and just like money's become a god. You know, the religion of money and the religion of technology seem to have become dominant, but they're not life-giving. You know, the life-giving stuff is what we need to be working with, and then there's a balance with those sort of things, right? I'll just give you a little bit of a rundown on the hollow earth theory, right? I'm not a flat earther, no way. Okay, and the flat earth information just defies logic absolutely, as far as I'm concerned. But if some of you have looked into the hollow earth theory, there seems to be credibility there, and so I went into a fair bit of research on it. And when you have a globe, you know, like planet Earth, we can obviously feel the effects of gravity on the outside. Now, I could ask the question, what's the gravity going to be right in the middle? Can anybody provide what they think that might be? You could do a symbol maybe. You know, is it 2? Is it one level of gravity? Is it 2 levels of gravity? Or is it...
Zero. Cancel out.
It's got to be 0. If you're in the center of the Earth, the gravity's got to be 0. It's the neutral point.
It might be levity,
Levity, what's that?
You know,
the opposite of gravity.
yeah, floating.
Oh, okay.
Polarity of gravity.
I never heard of that concept, but anyway. That's the conclusion, not just myself came to, and so why would there be so much mass in the middle of the planet? It doesn't make sense. Surely it would be further out where there is gravity, right? And when you look at a heavenly body, it's spinning, right? And it's spinning at a rate where it becomes like a torus, right? Where it comes in on itself on the poles, on both poles. And so it'll be kind of shaped like an apple. And so, you know, in some ways that kind of makes sense. It's spinning around, and the actual central gravity point is not, well, there is a central gravity point right in the center. It's 0, which kind of logically makes sense. But the mass of the Earth, according to some information I've come across, it's about, say, 1,500 miles, right, deep. And humans have not managed to travel more than a few miles underground, so they don't really know what's going on, right? So if we imagine that the mass of the Earth is about 1,500 miles deep, and so there's a crust on the outside, and there's actually a crust on the inside as well. Right, so that's the crust of the Earth. And the central gravity point happens to be in the middle, right in the middle of those 2 crusts. There's 0 gravity here as well, and it's right around the planet. I hope I've explained that reasonably. And there's tunnels going right through the Earth that the vast majority don't know about. And there's even civilizations living on the inside, right? And the way that's constructed is in the central point, there's actually a glowing, there's a sun, right? So, you know, we have our sun in our own way, in our solar system, but they have a sun which is in the center of the Earth, right? These are not just my ideas. Perhaps I sound balmy. You can check it out for yourself. If you want to know more of my sources, send me a message and I'll send you the information. And it's quite advanced. When you look at some of the books that describe this hollow earth system, it's also describing races which are spiritually far more advanced than ours, and they don't have any contact with the human species because we're still in a baby stage, right? And that's a strong feature of book number 4 of Conversations material. We're still in the baby stage, so it's no wonder that we're having trouble getting through this time. I don't rely on just those single sources. I rely on a bunch of sources, a bunch of information, and they're coming from all different places. And so I take care not to get stuck on one particular philosophy or whatever like that, because it could be wrong. And then I'd be in trouble because I'm mouthing off something which may not have credibility. So I do check my sources of information from far and wide. I was going to mention something about that. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I'll go back to where we kind of started. Can you see this exemption card? We're coming back down to earth now. In Victoria, you have to wear a mask, we're told. And I decided to make up my own health exemption card. Yeah, you can see it, I think. And the idea is that it's non-confrontational, it's conditional acceptance. I'll read it out. Precautionary principle, health exemption card. Research indicates that lowering oxygen level breathing and inhaling carbon dioxide is a potential hazard to my health. Instead of expelling toxins, I would inhale toxins and germs instead. Right? It's precautionary. And on the other side, it goes into more detail. If you can see that, whoops. And what I've got is, based on common sense, we are monitoring, preventing, and/or mitigating uncertain potential threat by not wearing a mask. And we conditionally accept the wearing of a face mask upon proof of claim that the mask does not cause harm, nor breaches any convention of human rights. And then I've got signed on behalf of the name, right? Because I'm not the name.
What is the, who signs that? Is that me? Do I sign that?
Well, I haven't had a chance to use it at this stage.
You can sign, yeah.
But if let's build a scenario, right? If I'm stopped in the street by police in their duties, this is conditional acceptance. I'm saying I'm not going to go into controversy. I'm not going to go into an argument.
No.
I'm going to say, yes, I'm happy to wear a mask, but can you prove that the mask doesn't cause me any harm? Because if I've got a mask on, even the post office guy that I spoke to the other day, he said, I'm not going to wear a mask 8 hours a day. I'll be sick by the end of the day. And that seems to make sense to me.
25% less oxygen.
Yeah, you're breathing in less oxygen, more carbon dioxide, and you're inhaling toxins, which we're supposed to be expelling. And the germs are also picking up on the material or whatever that are building up in the mouth. You know, the mouth is full of germs, right? And, you know, in normal circumstances, it's not going to bother us, right? Unless you don't brush your teeth or something like that. We'll be right. And so this is a peaceful way to deal with that situation.
Has it been has it been mandated that you have to wear a mask in Victoria? Because I'm not in Victoria, so I don't know.
Okay, well, it's a moving target. On Tuesday, when I checked the Department of Human Services website, it was not mandated, right? It actually said if you don't wear a mask, even though we're asking you to, it won't be imposed on you. So I assumed, hey, great, well, we've got no restrictions. Yeah, okay. And then a few hours later, I checked, I initially checked it at 10:30 in the morning, no restriction, right? At 1 o'clock, I checked it again, and it became a directive, right? And it's got a section at the bottom which is it's headed enforcement, right? And the enforcement does not say mandatory. What it says is you must wear a mask, otherwise you may be fined. Now that's the most vaguest piece of legislation I've ever heard of in my life. Hey?
Doesn't say you will be fined.
You may be fined, right? God is so vague. And we know it's not law anyway, because it hasn't gone through the Houses of Parliament. It hasn't been, there's no proclamation certificate for it. It basically doesn't make any sense.
Is it in, you must wear a mask in what circumstances?
If you step outside.
If you step out, right.
All right. Now we see people driving in their cars all by themselves and they've got the mask on.
Yeah, I've seen that today. Come on, ridiculous.
And we're finding it rather bizarre. And in a way, well, that's their reality, right? And because I'd like to come from a peaceful, non-confrontational situation, I have to allow them to do that. If that's their belief system, that they must do this, that, or the other, I'm happy to respect that. But I do have difficulty with the idea that it applies to me. And so I created this health exemption card as a non non-confrontational way as a first base, you know, because I've actually collected other information, but it's confrontational.
Yeah. Are you talking about this stuff?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, because I looked at that and I was thinking, I can't do that. I can't be that person. You know, I'm not. That's not really my thing.
Yeah.
Or if I were to be that person, I'd have to role play. You know.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good strategy, though.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, you could role play and have a bit of fun.
Yeah. It'd be good to have other people to do it with, so you know they could play the part of the intimidating bully cop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't normally have any dealings with the police. You know, I just go about my business. For some reason, I think that generally speaking, I'm you know, invisible to them. But with this now, I won't be wearing the mask. There's no way.
Mm.
Or I might be playing around with it a little bit. So, for example, I might go to the shopping centre and wear a mask, but it'll have something like, is COVID real, with a web link on it, you know? So I'm going to be probably a little bit, I'm sticking my head out now.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it might be inevitable if we're still trying to be peaceful and we're walking around the streets. We're gonna have some sort of meeting, you know, with these people. I don't know, and I just don't know how it's going to work out.
I don't know if I'm more fearful of the police. I mean, they're just employees for a firm, or the general public. I mean, what about those people who really get get angry over people who are defying this? You know what I'm talking about.
I saw it today in the street.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
God.
this guy in a suit comes out. He starts yelling at people, "Where's your mask?" And they were swearing and all this sort of thing. It appeared to me he must be some sort of control freak. But anyway, there will be that situation. And actually, that's a good point. There's a video, a 2-minute video, which is circulating. And it's also been reported in some of the news, the Daily Mail of UK. Tony sent it to me, actually. And yeah, it's on Facebook everywhere, and law groups have put it up everywhere and all this. And what it is, it's a young lady who's being guided from the passenger seat. She's driving a van or something like that. And she stops at a checkpoint, and she doesn't open the window, and she says to the police officer, "Have I disturbed the peace?" And had to ask that question 2 or 3 times, and the police officer eventually said, "No." Have I disturbed the peace today? And the police officer said no. And the police officer wanted her to wind the window down, and she said, no, you can hear what I'm saying. I don't have to answer those questions, whatever they were. And then she asked the police officer, "Have I committed a crime?" And I don't know if the police officer really actually responded to that, but she waved, I think it was waved her on.
She said no, that she hadn't.
Sorry?
She said no, that she hadn't.
Okay, no, that she hadn't committed a crime. And off she went. You know, she was waved on. And so when I last looked at the Facebook post this afternoon, there was about 11,000 comments on that post. So fairly quickly, it's spread like wildfire. But then I had a look at some of the comments.
Oh, no.
And most of the comments were really angry at her, right? I won't go into the language, but it was really strong. I'm being shown.
Is that also Facebook filtering out other comments potentially?
Don't know. Almost every comment that I read, and I didn't go through a lot, but almost every comment that I read was blasting her. You know, they were really angry. One of them saying, "Well, obviously she hasn't had a loved one die from this virus." Well, there's only been 2 or 3 in Victoria the last few weeks that have died, or a small number, a handful.
Yeah, I know.
And when you hear it on the news, they're in their 90s.
Yeah, I know. 90s. I heard one was 100.
And they're blaming it on COVID-19.
There could also be the potential that those comments were bots. I think that maybe, Facebook has bots or
Mm.
paid, paid
It's possible.
commenters.
Um,
But I wouldn't be surprised though if a large portion of the population actually does feel that way.
yeah.
You
And
know, it's a
that
bit
concerns
Yeah, I think they do. That's what really concerns me. It's I
Yeah.
think like you're probably looking at like 95% of the population
I think
are
so.
actually, actually just completely compliant with this, completely believe, what's on the, news every night and what they're being told. And
There's also the
bizarre,
lynch
like-
mob mentality. Truthstream Media recently did a great video on crowd behavior and crowd psychology and how the crowd itself actually becomes like an animal, like a being.
yeah, it has its own they put out some good videos, those guys. Yeah.
So we're
I
up
don't know
against
what I
that.
think, really.
That's probably the real scary part, not the police.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Hello. I just want to say, hi, I'm Matthew.
Hi.
Oh,
I was out working today at my trade as a carpenter.
Yep.
And I was fixing a milk bar front door that had been smashed in. So I was out in the front of the shop and watching passers-by go past, and I decided not to wear a mask because why the fuck would I want to?
Yeah.
And I got a few comments from people coming into the milk bar, "Where's your mask?" And I was like, yeah, I'm all right. Thanks for asking. And I saw one woman power walking past, and I yelled out to her, I said, "Hey, you don't need a mask when you're exercising." And she said, "Oh, that's only cycling and running." And then she just said, "Where's your mask?"
Yeah.
Oh, man, so sad,
Yeah, my neighbour asked me where my mask was. I might actually have a bit of a talk to him, but yeah, it's so sad, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean,
My another friend of mine got she wasn't allowed to enter Office Works.
yeah,
She doesn't wear a mask, and they wouldn't let her in.
Bunnings have done the same thing.
yeah, okay, yeah.
So I haven't been to the shops. I actually stocked up before this. I knew.
Yeah. Just the other day, I was working with a colleague, and he actually he doesn't like the idea of wearing a mask either. And he had his girlfriend's G-string like over his head. Anyway, that was interesting. That was interesting. Yeah. So yeah, it's just it's all entertainment, really.
yeah.
How do we navigate through this? So I
Yeah.
mean,
I was wondering what you meant about you don't feel comfortable with this stuff. Meaning, are you talking about you don't feel comfortable with the
Oh,
alternative law stuff?
yeah.
So,
Well,
trying to teach yourself how to, say all this alternative law stuff, like, if a policeman, because I mean, I've been learning alternative law a bit.
is that me you're talking to?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've always thought, oh no, I wouldn't ever be able to do that. I'm sure I would, I'm sure they'd find a fault with something I've said and next minute they'd arrest me or something. So I've always been a bit scared, but I'm thinking maybe we will have to learn this stuff.
We do, I think. Yeah.
I think that's the key word. I think that's the key word. Learn. You learn to be confident. When you learn the truth, you learn to be confident, and
Yeah.
you take baby steps.
But all this law stuff is quite meticulous. You have to learn all the right words to say and know that you don't say all the other words that are wrong,
Yeah.
and you've got to say it correctly. And
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, or you can keep it very basic,
Yes.
and you can outsmart people just keeping it very minimal.
Yeah.
And you are basically, because you ask them questions. You don't have to pump information at them. You ask them, and you make them validate their attitude. You know, like,
Yeah. What was my crime?
yeah.
What did I do?
Yeah.
What was my crime?
You have to be confident. You have to have
Yeah.
an air of confidence as
Correct.
well.
I think for
Yeah.
me, it's just the fact that I've never really done it before. That's all. I mean, I think maybe if I did it once or twice, it'd be second nature then. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But George has got this thing here that he sent me on what and how to approach, what to do when the policeman approaches you. But but George doesn't do that. He uses his card. So
It might be confrontational.
yeah, I think that I felt that as well, you know. And I didn't understand the second part. It said something like, if you have your document with you, hand it to them now.
Oh, that's a conditional acceptance, and the document, it came from one of the law groups that's running online, and it's getting a lot of airplay. And the documents say, I'm going to charge you $10,000 an hour if you pursue this.
That's what that Tony Baba is.
The
What
what?
is it?
Tony.
What is it?
You've seen that, eh? Yeah. Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of charges adding up to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So we can get rich out of this, can we?
And you know, some people might have some luck with that. Good luck to them. And you know, it actually might intimidate somebody trying to enforce something as well. It might have some success, but it is kind of confrontational. I think. Actually, I wanted to share one further bit of special information about all this, and it's like a bit of a verification. There's a clinical hypnotherapist that we know quite well, and we've been associated with him for many years. And he's a past life regression clinical hypnotherapist, and he's gathered hundreds of cases that he's done over the years, and he's part of a network of past life regression clinical hypnotherapists around the world, right? And they gather this information from their clients. So we're talking about maybe thousands or even tens of thousands of cases which they're collating from past life regression hypnotherapy. And by statistically collating that information and looking at the trends of people going into deep hypnosis, a typical session might be 4 hours, and that's necessary in order to get somebody really deep. And they go into past lives, they vision past life situations. Some of them go so deep that they actually identify with some other alien species, right? And the technique was kind of discovered by two main researchers, Michael Newton and Brian Weiss. Could have been in the 1980s or 90s, I'm not quite sure. And one of the techniques is when somebody goes to a clinical hypnotherapist because they've got some sort of emotional psyche issue, the practitioner suggests to them, once they're in deep hypnosis, go back to where the problem began. And to their surprise, they are taken back, not necessarily to something in this lifetime, but in some previous lifetime, right? And once they get taken back to the situation that caused the problem, which is causing them heaps of problems in this lifetime, they don't actually change the past, right? It's
just him to acknowledge it.
They acknowledge it and they heal it for what it is, right?
Mm.
And then when the person
Comes back.
comes back, they're magically healed, right? On the way, the hypnotherapists managed to gather heaps and heaps of information about these cases, and we've had this therapist here for many years. He's not here now, and he was also a very good speaker. And when he started doing his talks here, I conferred with his information, and I totally agreed with what he had to say. And based on information I was guided to way back in the early 1980s, right? And he did say to me, "Well, how could you know that information? This is a new science. You know, it becomes a science when all the statistics build up. It's not just hearsay."
Because it's consciousness.
Yeah, it's so well documented. Anyway, and I said to him, well, actually, I do know this stuff, right? It agrees with the information I was guided to in the early 1980s, which told us about our soul journeys, the higher self, our soul families, the reason for incarnation, the reason why the danger that humanity is in. You know, we back then we were heading down the path of destruction. It was almost certain that we were going to do it, but there were some very powerful influences towards the late 1980s which changed that, and we evolved just that enough amount that we didn't have to go through catastrophe. Right? So I seemed to have all this special information which I couldn't share with anybody because everybody thought I was nuts, right? The information was saying that this sort of information is going to sweep through humanity the coming decades, and that's exactly what it's doing. But it was also very damning of humanity. It said, well, you know, look at the 20th century, what a violent time that was. Not just the 20th century, but go back centuries. It was horrific what man's inhumanity to man was. Anyway, we managed to get off the knife's edge so that we don't have to go through massive catastrophe. And that kind of catastrophe happens due to consciousness levels, right? If the consciousness level stayed below a threshold, we would have had to go through the catastrophe. And fortunately, the consciousness level rose just that little bit where we don't have to go through it. But because we're so close to that knife's edge, it's hard work now for the light bearers of the planet to bring about a more positive result to awaken the species. Right? That's the title of the conversations, book number 4, Awaken the Species. And there is a chance that we won't awaken. We might carry on with our technocratic, socialistic, almost communistic type society instead of awaken. Anyway, getting back to the hypnotherapy, yeah, I encountered the hypnotherapist again the other day, and we had a good old chat, and he's still doing the modality, and as was the case over the years, he's still gathering information that clients give him. You know, he's able to identify when he's hypnotizing someone whether they're a young soul or an old soul or anything in between, right? The old souls, he might ask them about certain topics or whatever that, or the old soul might actually volunteer some information which is helpful to humanity. And he told us that the situation happening on the planet actually has to happen, right? The lockdowns and the changing situation going towards socio-communistic, although he didn't like that term, where everybody is going to be looked after by this socio-communistic realm, although it is technocratic. Right? I don't personally resonate with it, but it needs to happen, and that sort of ties in with the information that we've been presenting in many of our presentations over the weeks and the months. What I was putting forward is that it needs to happen because most of the human race is going down the indulgent path, right? Where we're crowding into big cities, and that's not supposed to be the way humans are living. Consumerism, yeah. Consumerism means you're not producing the things that are vital to life. And our own westernized method of economics is all about consumerism.
Yeah.
We're classified as consumers. And yeah, I look at that information. I say it's a lie. You know, I think about 10 years ago, I came to that conclusion. We're not consumers, we're producers. Right? We do consume, but we also produce. Anyway, it needs to happen because people are herding themselves into the big cities, and of course the food has to come from somewhere. And if the trucks stop coming into a big city, the big city will run out of food within a few days, right? And the vast majority of that food is coming from industrial agriculture. And if you look at the information, you know, I've put out plenty of links to information which is saying that industrial agriculture is the problem, and it's why the insects are disappearing, right? It's also why it's destroying the topsoil, or it's harming the soil, right? Because their big machines turn over the soil and expose it to the elements. And that's like you or I spending the night out in the paddock naked. It's not going to be good for our health. You know, you've got no shelter out there, and it's well, damn near freezing in Melbourne. And that's what they're doing to the soil. And in order to make it produce, they also chuck chemicals on, superphosphate and a whole bunch of other things, probably herbicides or whatever like that. And that's poisoning the soil even further, and it's also poisoning us, right? So over the last few years, I've highlighted that problem with some of the movies that we've shown, and the most powerful one of those was earlier this year. It's called The Need to Grow. If you go back to book number 2 of the Conversations with God material, there's a quote from there. So there's actually half a chapter on this very problem. And it's saying, you're running out of good soil for you to grow your food on. But the main premise of the Conversations books is actually the opposite. There is enough for everyone. Right? If we have a consciousness that there's not enough for everyone, that's like an excuse for genocide. Right? We need to get that out of our consciousness. There is enough for everyone, but we need to be consumers. Sorry, not consumers, the opposite, producers, right? And we don't become producers until groups of us move onto the land, right, and start producing food the God-given way, let's say, right, where we're nurturing the soil, right? If you look at the way the indigenous people describe the earth, it's a sentient being. Yeah, the elders, it's in many philosophies, and it's also in the metaphysics. The earth is a sentient being, and it's actually of a far higher dimension than what humans are. I've heard it expressed as being on the 30th dimension, and we're only third dimensional, right? And on that 30th dimensional level, it can support trillions of forms of life on the planet, right? So that's how loving it is. It's giving itself to all this so-called life on the planet. It's giving of itself unconditionally, right? Because it loves us, right? If you look at the relationship between us and Earth, but if we do become too much of an irritant, it can very easily throw us off. And you know, there's biblical references to that. If I remember in Isaiah, it can shrug its shoulders and just throw us off the earth. And that was about to happen in 1992, and it didn't happen. It's even in the Book of Revelation, right? But the Book of Revelation, according to Cryon, is actually not exclusively about Armageddon. The Book of Revelation is actually got all the scenarios, all the timelines that we are able to choose. And one of those is catastrophe at one end. The other one is awakening, and it's the golden age, and all the other ones in between. Which one do you want to choose, right? Actually, only yesterday, the TV was on. Now, many people will demonize the TV. I don't. It's another tool that can be used for the positive, right? Provided you're choosy about what you're going to watch, it can be a very useful tool. And Current Affair was on at the time. And a current affair presented a solution to the world's food problems.
No.
You know what I mean? Do you see it, did you?
No, I didn't, but I can imagine.
I was horrified.
Oh, no.
It's what it is they're going to use 3D printers to make food.
Yeah, that's right.
They were making
3D food.
before our very eyes chicken McNuggets,
Oh no!
right?
But haven't the technocrats had this in the pipeline for a while?
Oh yeah, they've been working on it for a long time, right? And
We're going to be like eating, 100 grams of protein a day or something.
some sort of homogeneous mixture, which they package up and process to such a degree that they can print any size, any type of food, right?
Oh God!
And if there's a food shortage on the planet or a soil shortage, we don't have to worry anymore.
But that's a conspiracy. That's conspiracy.
Well, this was on Current Affair.
I know.
They
I know.
actually,
I saw it.
they actually proposed that it was the solution to the food crisis on planet Earth, right?
And the irony that the conspiracies are right in our faces.
They were asking people whether they
Right
would
here.
eat it.
Yeah,
They
so
were asking people whether they would eat it or not. And most said yes.
yeah, most were saying yes, they would eat it.
Yeah.
Most said yes.
Most, yeah, about 90% people
Where
said
did they
yes.
get that statistic from?
Oh, who knows?
No,
Yeah.
they're just asking people in the street, the reporter.
But looking at
Would you eat it? And about 90% of people said yes.
yeah, but anyway,
It's a worry.
the bigger picture is, when I get back to the hypnotherapy information, is that because people are choosing that lifestyle, it's not appropriate for us to prevent them expressing their free will.
Yeah.
Let them have it,
Yeah.
because they'll feel the, just like anything, they'll feel the effect of that situation if they start eating
3D printed food.
3D food. I don't think it'll help the health condition of humans.
Body.
Already the food is bad enough as it is.
Yeah, there's enough processed food in the world as it is, and we know it doesn't do us much good.
There's no life force in it.
Yeah, no life force in it. That's a good way to describe it.
In some ways, this whole COVID situation has been a real teacher to me, because let's say, okay, we're going to have difficulties now going to a supermarket because we don't want to wear the mask. That's telling me, okay, I don't actually fit in with these people. This supermarket is for the sleeping masses, so I shouldn't be going here anyway, right?
Yeah.
And I should be finding places where, they're more tolerant of a face or the possibility of people going against these arbitrary regulations, right? Where would you go shopping? Where would you go shopping now? Where would you go shopping, George?
Well, there are biodynamic stores and organic stores, which probably may not be so militant about it.
The one on Ferntree, Burwood Highway?
Yeah. Somebody I know went down there today,
Yeah,
and he went down there without a mask, right?
And he was more accepted, was he? Because I'm actually thinking of this in terms of practical measures for myself when I go shopping now. I'm not going to be going to the supermarkets anymore. I don't belong there.
Yeah. Well, he said that even in the Whole Food Market, in the one on Ferntree Gully, it was full of people with masks on. Right, so take that into account.
Yeah.
And of course, the information that we've been putting forward for the last several months is, and actually, let's go back 10 years or more. We're supposed to be living in tribal-like communities, and one of the best sources of information of that is The Conversation with God, book number 3, published in 1997. It's not the only one which provides that sort of information. The mind over matter information talks about, and that was that was published 1981. And what that talks about is the society that has missed corruption. There are examples of that. And in that society, it wasn't given to them. They put in a concerted effort of will to create this almost ideal society. I think we've covered this issue before. If you're going to go into a community situation, don't expect it to be a piece of cake. Right? There'll be hard work to set this thing up, but it'll also be very satisfying work. You'll love what you're doing, right? And
that's what I heard actually from another source, that basically, you know, you're talking about the two streams of humanity. The ones that go down the path of community, they will have the tough time in the first few years, right, setting things up. But then from then on, the quality of life will be far superior to that other.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, we're almost starting again. So we would have to expect a bit of hard work to get this thing started. I've noticed that
You've noticed that, George.
Yeah?
You've noticed it's hard work.
Of course, yeah, it'll be hard work. But there are many examples, and we've shown all of those examples on our cinema. We've actually connected with some of those communities that can that function along an idea of being producers rather than consumers. And the ringing cedars model, for example, from Russia, provides a model which I did adapt, and it's still on our website under the community link, which talks about if you set up something like that, within the first few years, it'll become self-sufficient. And then following after those few years, it'll be producing so much produce, and it'll be better than organic, right? Grown, right? And that's more ideal. That goes along the more ideal way of living. The ringing cedars is actually a resurgence of the Vedic information, right? It describes that the Vedic civilization was displaced by the pagan civilization, and then the Christian civilization displaced the pagan civilization, and that's where we're still at right now. But the Vedic, according to this information, the Vedic model was worldwide at one stage. And a lot of that message has been lost. And there's an opportunity to revitalize it now. And you know, one of the community inspired systems is the Ananda system, and we covered that in another session, which we haven't put up at this stage. But that's not the only one. There's quite a few, and they're all kind of saying the same thing, you know. And that video that you mentioned, Henry, it's actually Re-World Order, right? Actually, I'll bring up.
Talked about the strands.
Sorry.
When I talked about the two strands of humanity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's where
this is actually somebody else that I listened to. Her video channel is called New Earth, and she talked about it as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'll bring up the email I sent around because it goes into that subject. I'll share the screen. And let's see. All right, so everybody can see that?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what's happened to the Galactic Emissary. I did a little bit of preparation just in case he didn't turn up, and that's fine.
He went galactic, George.
He went galactic. Okay, fine.
He went galactic, George.
He went galactic. Okay. Doesn't matter. He's probably very busy, and he's doing the nuts and bolts thing. If I go down to, on this email, if I go down to this diagram, which I've shown before, a lot of people that have come through what we're doing here, they don't stick with it. They're too busy dealing with the system. Yeah, they're fighting the system, maybe, right? But it does have a positive aspect to it. You know, I called it the middle path so that I wasn't I didn't want to disrespect them. And they're fighting the system. It says, learn the rules so that you know how to break them. And in the conversation book number 4, it even says that, learn the rules so that you know how to disobey them. And so they're providing a vital service, perhaps, because if we do get collectives and we go into the rural environment, then it's probably going to be a good idea to have a good knowledge of how they can protect themselves from a kind of an invasion situation, which starts with statutory rules, right? Because in the guidelines that I've been passed on with, it's a good idea to have only one single interface to the system. You know, say you have a rural cooperative, you don't subdivide the land into different lots. You have it all on one single title, and everybody is part of that, right? Everybody, if even ownership doesn't apply, right? The ownership is every person, every individual involved has ownership of the entire land, but they've only got a small part, you know, small part of the suitable for their needs, right? In the highly evolved information, there is no concept of ownership, and that's the way we've got to go. We need to be stewards or custodians of the land, and you know, there might be an indigenous link to that, which might become important for us, right? A lot of people, though, are going to stay on the angry path. Despite my rage, I am still just a rat in the cage, and what they're trying to do is restore things the way they were in the consumer-based society. And so I've called them consumer/activist. Is it a good idea to stay in that? Maybe not. And one of the points that I picked up from a Facebook post, and I was impressed by it, that's what I'm showing now. Nothing should go back to normal. Normal wasn't working. If we go back to the way things were, we will have lost the lesson. May we rise up and do better. So that sort of corroborates what the hypnotherapist was saying. This needs to happen, right? Because we need to change the way we are. I think I actually documented it a little bit further up. All right, this is the the health exemption card, and here's a suggested mask, which I wouldn't recommend either, because the germs are going to build up on that organic surface, isn't it? Right? Neat idea, but I don't know if I'd want to use it. So that's one side of the card. I've got A4 sheets where you can print out 8 of these cards. If anybody wants one, let me know. And a number of people have sent me an email saying, yes, I do want it, and I've supplied it to them. And that's the other side of the card.
A little bit unclear about how to use that card. Do we just give it to the police, and who signs that in there?
I guess we would have to sign it, right? Sign on behalf of the name.
So we sign it when they approach us, and we give it to them?
If necessary, right? If you're getting pinned down, then you can say, well, I've got a precautionary principle health exemption card, right? And here it is. And they might say, well, what's your exemption? And then you'll say, well, it's the precautionary principle. And in fact, if there's a medical issue, medical information is privileged, right? You're under no obligation to give it to somebody who is not medical.
That's right.
Of course, the police are not medical, right? You can say to them, well, I can't give you that information. You're not a medical practitioner. You're not qualified. Yeah, sorry?
You're not my medical.
Yeah, you're not my medical practitioner. And so I can't give you that information. Just accept that all I can tell you, it's precautionary. And on the other side, it's conditional acceptance. Right? In other words, I'm happy to wear a face mask, but you have to prove to me that it doesn't cause any harm. And from what I've seen, it does cause harm.
Well, I've actually got this this printout that I found on a website. It's called Mask Science.
Okay.
And this is actually a whole list of quotes from. It's a journal article, peer review, experts in the field, showing how, firstly, masks do not contain the spread of a contagion. And then, of course, the health effects as well. So I've been doing a little bit of pamphlet dropping. So this is what I made up, and I did it the night before of the new order. So.
Okay. Yeah, well, what I've said here on these 2 paragraphs is if we do accept this mask mandate, and it's not a mandate, if you have a look at the enforcement section of the Department of Human Services, it doesn't mandate it, it says you must.
Yeah, I know.
Right? And then it says you may get a fine, right? That's super vague, and it's not based on law as far as I'm concerned, right? So the next logical steps, if we do accept the mask thing, power music. Well, I said if this common cold variant agenda, I'm calling it a common cold variant because that's what it is. According to Wikipedia, it's a variant of the common cold, and it's also on the US medical lab report or something. It's a common coronavirus is a common cold variant, and so we're going into lockdown based on something called the common cold, and we don't have immunization for the common cold. We don't have a vaccination for it, but they'll be telling you, they're already telling us they're going to bring out a vaccination for it. Right? I'm not saying it is the common cold, but it appears to be.
How can they have done that when there's 19 different, 21 different variants of it.
Well, there are different variants of the common cold. When I get the common cold,
No, vaccination, how are they going to give vaccination if they haven't isolated which variant it is?
well, who knows? It's not science as far as I can see. I'm not making any claims.
Science, all right, phony science.
When I get a common cold,
Phony science.
it's always different. I might get a head cold, I might get a belly cold or a chest cold. It's always different. Right? I don't get them that often, but I have had them. And when we went to Brazil, I had the worst cold I'd ever had in central Brazil, and I was tricked into going in for an operation with John of God. When I came out, the cold had disappeared. Right? I kid you not. Right? Despite all the bad press happening with John of God, that was a remarkable healing. Because you can't heal the common cold. It's actually a cleansing. I think I was given a demonstration from the entities of John of God.
You're not the physical meaning of a cold. It means you haven't made a decision about something important in your life.
Okay,
That's when
maybe.
you get cold, you have to spend the 3 days in bed to recover. It gives you time to think about it.
Okay, 3 days in bed to recover.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so if we agree to this mask wearing, then and if it prospers, then perhaps the next logical steps might be mandatory testing, mandatory vaccinations, mandatory microchipping, and then reprisals for non-compliance. However, there is information indicating that this new technocratic socio-communistic realm needs to happen. And if it happens to me, then somewhere at a very deep level I've chosen it. I'm suggesting that applies to everyone. Right? If you're in that socio-communistic realm and you're unhappy about it, at a deep level you've chosen to be here. And so that's without judgment. If that's what you've chosen, there must be a reason behind it, and those reasons can be infinitesimal or infinite in variety. Yeah, and then in the next paragraph, I'm saying basically industrial agriculture that the urbanized technocratic society depends on is not only inefficient, but destroys topsoil and the ecology as well. So the simplest solution to feed everyone is to control, and eliminate most of the population. Right, that'll be the lockdown masters. And if that's the case, what are we complaining about? They're just doing what they think is best for us. You know, let's reduce the population in what seems to be a drastic way to do that. And perhaps it's not necessary. You know, perhaps they're misguided.
COVID-19.
Well, they're using the COVID-19 as a cover to implement the lockdowns and perhaps the depopulation. And I'm just mentioning that, and yeah, it may not be true. I could be wrong. But what I got from the hypnotherapist is this needs to happen. You know, we need to change. That's what I said to him. It's because we need to change, and he agreed, and that's why it's happening. So a little bit further down. Oh, we've got a community basics webinar from last week. I might be putting that up soon. And that was the movie last week, Media Shadows, a very powerful show on how the media brainwashes the masses. Imaginary Lockdown Masters, that's already up on the YouTube site. And some of you have seen this before, the CV-19 hoax worldwide. It compares the number of deaths by coronavirus versus all the indulgent elements, the smoking, the alcohol. The hunger should not be happening, and yet it's a big one.
Is this the
Biggest-
poster?
Hey?
Is this the poster you were talking about in the email?
Yeah, you can request this poster if you want. The biggest one that was identified by Worldometers is abortion. That's amazing, isn't it?
What about war?
It didn't list war.
Could have gone probably several million more with war.
Who knows? Yeah. But war is a less of a feature this century. The war is much more subtle in the 21st century. War in the 20th century was obvious. And so we're at a bit of a disadvantage in this century. There's a war, but we don't even know it's happening.
Well, I always,
Bombs.
I remember George Bush Jr. saying that he'd given $35 billion to the Defense Department. And I thought, gosh, you know, what would they spend that amount of money on? And I've been thinking lately that they've been sort of spending it on planning on how can we ring war on. I mean, we're sick of sort of doing Afghanistan, Syria, and now they're turning on us, the people, you know, and they're doing it by, you know, media manipulation, and maybe that's what they're spending their money on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've tried to explain why this is just my own conclusions, and they could be wrong, right? That the cause is because they may have identified that they just can't feed the population the way it's going. You know, crowding into big cities and getting even more and more dependent on industrial agriculture, which poisons the planet and poisons us as well. And so that's why, and then there needs to be a solution. If a lot of the population decided the other way, if it was getting more and more awakened, it would say, hey, let's decentralize. There's plenty of land, right? People have got this idea that we're overpopulated, right? But if you travel, Australia is a big case actually, because we don't have a big population. If you travel from Melbourne to Sydney, and whether you fly or you drive, nearly all the time, it's just empty land. Why is that? You know, who owns all that land? And I would say it would be the corporate farmers. And they've got to build a little bit of cattle on there, right? Now, one head of cattle, according to some Ayurvedic information, requires 5 hectares, right? In order, just one head of cattle, and it only feeds one person, right? But 5 hectares, surely you could feed 5 families on 5 hectares. I've seen it in the philosophies I've worked with, the yoga and the Ayurveda, that you can grow a lot of produce on 5 hectares. And I've also seen that 5 hectares is the formula they use when they sell a rural piece of land in cattle country, right? So the land that we've referred to over and over again is in those realms, right? And there's a piece of land which is 500 hectares, and on the ad it says it's suitable for 100 head of cattle, right? It's the same formula. If I go a little bit further down, this is the documentary that we've been talking about, showing the 2 streams of humanity. Yeah, I'd recommend watching that. There might be a window of opportunity to work the ideas presented in this video called Real World Order on YouTube. Let's say that we'd like to be traveling up to the some land that we've mentioned and do some planting, right? And that'll be September, October, if everything goes to plan and we're able to travel, because that's about the right time of year to plant in that region most of the vegetables, a lot of the vegetables, put it that way. And then if we can organise another working bee in January to actually build something, and I've mentioned this before as well, we can look at building some accommodation like a conference centre or something like that. It's something I need to get organised. And if there are carpenters, builders that can guide us along that way, I'm all ears. Okay. Yeah. The yoga there. Yoga school. And the magpie alert. Anyway, I think I've covered just about everything I needed to say tonight. And we've had a little bit of discussion. Hang on a sec, I just got to set the internet time. Yeah, that's about. And let's stop the share. Well, we've had some discussion on the way. Any other discussion?
Questions?
Questions? What do I know though? I don't know anything. Has anybody got any ideas for transition?
Well, I'm a little bit in the dark about where you're actually up to. Have you actually bought the block of land, and have you got people? Have they bought into it and all that?
Well, we bought the land more than 10 years ago.
Oh.
Right.
Okay.
And we've learned quite a bit about human nature over the years, and in a lot of ways it can be problematic. And so we've toyed around with getting something started, and it was difficult. Plus, we are very remote, and we're not in a popular area. Right, the popular ones are down in the hinterland regions where it's always warm. You can get infested by ticks and things like that, but it is a more abundant environment, and there's a lot more water in those areas. But you're also close to the corporate influence. There's some very powerful and organised groups setting up in those regions, and it might be somewhere the people would want to go. And actually, in the last couple of days, I've been communicating with a guy. The land that we've been referring to is on the northern tablelands of New South Wales. But in the last couple of days, I've been communicating with a guy which I've communicated with over the years, and he's got land in northern Victoria, and he would like to invite people to do things there as well. It's a lot closer. if we want to look at that, but it's not too close to the city, right? It's not on the outskirts of Melbourne. But one of the reasons he's out there is because he's highly electro-hypersensitive. And so he can't come to the city realm.
Yeah, I am a bit too, I think.
Okay, yeah, a lot of us are. And so he can't come to the city realm. And he said he wishes he could because of all the stuff that we're putting out there. But he said that he invited lots of electrosensitive people onto his land, and honestly, it hasn't been a pleasant experience, he says. There's too many personalities which are troublesome. And I could confer with that from the idea of how a tribal type situation can operate. You don't want a bunch of egos together.
No.
It's problematic. And westernized mindset itself can be problematic because it's quite ego based. And I do what I want sort of thing. Well, does that benefit the entire collective, or does it take away from it? When people might say, well, if I join a community, what can I get out of it? Shouldn't it be the other way around? If I join a community, what can I contribute? It's just a simple mindset revolution. Yeah.
Service to self.
Right. So he's had experience in that, and in some ways he says he's had a gutful, but he's still
still open to it, is he?
would like to. Sorry.
He's still open to.
Yeah, he's still open. He wants to do something, and I'll be in touch with him a bit more.
Whereabouts? What area are you saying?
It's more central Victoria, I think. I'll point it out later.
That could be good for me. Yeah, because I'm sort of looking around. I one of the issues though is the restriction on movement. You have to, like we were talking last time, you use your psychic skills, you go via back roads. So there are back roads, aren't there?
If you're travelling within Victoria, I'm sure you can have some sort of script that will be suitable for anywhere you go.
Right.
If you're trying to get across the border, it might be more difficult. And, so we might be looking for ways to, I don't know how the timeline's going to present itself if that's what we want to do, and how we can implement it. Actually, there's I don't know if it's still there, but there's a poster on the local supermarket board, which is showing a truck, and it's been semi-converted into a motorhome.
Yeah. I was just thinking of the idea of smuggling people across the border.
No, I'm not putting it forward like that. I'm saying this is an idea that we've proposed over the years. Get yourself a truck, make it into a motorhome, because it's like a tiny home on wheels.
Yeah.
You build a tiny home, you can move it, but it's not that easy.
That's right.
If you have a truck or even a bus, you can buy a 50 or 60-seater, 70-seater bus for about $10,000, and it's in reasonable condition, right? It doesn't mean you're going to drive it everywhere all the time. It means you can move it if you need to. But this ad for this truck is still up there. Well, I haven't checked the last couple of days. It would make a a combined movable home if anybody wants one. You know, another way is a caravan. That may not be as convenient. I don't know. Or in some ways it would be more convenient. Anyway, those are just some ideas.
Lots of options.
Yeah, there are options, and the movable idea is probably useful in this transition period. The other way is, you know, we mentioned the conference centre, which can have lots and lots of bedrooms, is still classified as one dwelling, if at all, you know, because it's a conference centre. And if it's got some of the elements of the teachings that we work with, it could have a spiritual significance, which will give it some sort of credibility. And if you're smart about it, then you can set it up in a way that the so-called authorities would be okay with you. Isn't that a better way to take it? Isn't that a better direction rather than staying angry about it? Just be productive.
Yeah.
And you know, I've heard it from so many people who are more focused on fixing the system and taking on the situations with anger. That if you do set up something in the bush and the rural area, you're just going to get invaded by them anyway. And I'm saying no, that won't be the case because you're setting something up which is productive. You're not part of the problem.
That's right. Yeah.
If you're living in the city, you're part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I hope I'm not being judgmental with that expression.
No.
I don't mean to be.
Can I?
Yeah, I mean, you can end up part of the problem unwittingly. You know, that's what I've done.
Well, you know, I've always been city-based, but my name is the name I've been given is George, and George happens to mean farmer. I know about farming.
And did you say? Sorry, did I? I just need to clarify. Did you say the land you've got is in New South Wales?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, right.
I could say we were either guided or maybe we were tricked into going to that region. Because originally I was the one saying, oh, it's got to be in Victoria, you know, when we started looking. It's our home. And when we looked around Victoria, it wasn't cheap. There wasn't that much supply. The really nice pieces of land are on state forest or crown land, so you can't get access to them anyway. And then the big one was bushfires, right? Everywhere we went in Victoria, there was massive evidence of bushfires. And when we went to Mount Hotham, you know, 1,800 metres high, the whole area had been incinerated.
God.
All the way to the top. That's the fact. That's the aspect of Victorian life. You will every so often, several decades, maybe 2 or 3, you'll get a catastrophic day which will burn most of the state. Right, and that's happened in recent memory as well. The one last year was very severe in, as we know, in New South Wales as well. But the severity was on the eastern side of the range, which is supposed to be more lush. Well, it is more lush. It gets more rainfall. But when you get catastrophic conditions, it burns. You know, eucalypts are, they're explosive, right? Even when a eucalypt forest is burned, it'll burn again. Right? And if you listen to some of the Cryon channelings that happened earlier this year, Cryon will tell you that as well. You have to take extreme measures in the Australian bush. Right. It's such a volatile place. If you go to the western side of the ranges, though, where it's not so popular, it's rural, and the fire danger seems to be much lower.
Mm.
And we experienced that
Yes.
when we were there in January.
Mm.
So that's been the ideas that we put forward.
Okay.
And
And has it got a building on it?
yeah, there's a home.
You were saying there's a homestead with lots of rooms. Or is it?
Not that many rooms. It's also got shearing shed, and it's got in the shearing shed. It's got a nice big space. If we organise it nicely, it would make a great yoga space. You know, it's pretty airy, but you know, because it's built out of bits and pieces of wood.
Stinky.
Sorry,
Stinky.
Stinky.
Stinky in there. It smells like sheep.
Oh, get out of it. That was 10 years ago.
That's to be clean.
Yeah, I'm actually reading a very special book at the moment that I got from Jason. I'd like to show you this because I think it's really relevant. Back in a minute. Over here.
What's it called?
Oh, there we go. Okay, it's a book called Dark Emu,
Right.
and I think it's an Indigenous writer. It's got lots of awards, and what it is, it's about the Australian Indigenous cultures since the land was settled by the British. You know, it goes right back to the early 1800s, maybe even 1700s. And what it's sharing is that the picture that we've been given about the Indigenous races in Australia is not correct. It's not necessarily hunter-gatherer. Right? What this guy has done, he's collected a vast range of material from the very, very early settlers in Australia who have documented the Indigenous way of life, and it's surprisingly organised. They've got communities, they've got culture, they've got agriculture, right? They know how to work the land. And there were, in Australia, in areas that we would call desert these days, they used to have grasslands which were huge, right? And those grasslands were quite productive, right? These days, they're desert. And one of the major reasons for those grasslands disappearing is because of sheep. Sheep and cattle, but sheep mainly, yeah, have a look, yeah. The sheep are obviously attracted to the grasslands, and Australia became one of the biggest producers of wool around the world, and we had a huge population of sheep, and the grasslands disappeared. It was one of the staple diets.
Yeah.
And I think the yam was another one. That's the picture on the front cover. And they used to have very sophisticated methods of water management as well. And to much of the so-called educated people, this is a complete turnaround, you know, of information. The Aborigines, as they're called, or some people call them, were so well organised, and they also had regions in Australia where they didn't cross over boundaries, right? So they would have these very secure food stores. We're talking about tons and tons of food that was stored, right? Because that's the sensible thing to do. Store some food because you might need it one day. And they never used to get raided, right? When they got raided, it was from the white settlers, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's a complete turnaround.
And I read a book, I remember years ago, which talked about how we've changed the drainage of the country. Like there was some sort of natural and very good way of drainage. I don't know exactly what he meant, but and you know, just by us making the rivers deeper and various other things, we've just totally changed the drainage.
I think you're talking about Peter Andrews.
No, I'm not sure. It wasn't him, I don't think. It was a book before him. This one was mainly talking about animals, but he mentioned drainage as well.
Okay.
But it was years ago now. So.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in because, you know, we can probably learn from that book. That was a very decentralized society, but they had like towns, and the reason they disappeared so quickly is because the materials they used to construct those towns were kind of organic. You know, they go back into the soil if they're not properly maintained. That reminds me of a village we visited in Peru, of all places, 5 years ago. The village actually wasn't on land, right? The village was actually on Lake Titicaca, and it's I think it's the biggest inland lake in the world. It's massive, right? And these people, possibly for thousands of years, have built an existence on floating islands. They've created them by using some of the weed, not the weed, some of the rushes that grow in the lake, and they weave them together and they create these islands, and everything is built from this material. Even the houses are built from this material, and because it's organic, it has to be replaced every couple of years, right? So we were invited into their homes, and the homes weren't too large, you know, there's kind of igloo size. And we asked them lots of questions. I've actually got it on video, and they told us that every couple of years they have to rebuild because the reeds start to rot. Right? So, you know, that's pretty innovative, pretty clever.
Yeah.
And they still exist. You know, they're it gave them safety because they positioned themselves out into the lake where they couldn't get invaded by invaders.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like a village. You know, and so those sort of collectives can operate in different ways. You know, if you're on the land, obviously you won't have to build reed boats.
No.
There's a million ways you can do things.
Yes. Yeah. And with the property that you've got, were you going to convert the shearing sheds into like dwellings? buildings or?
Well, they're not that large. What I would suggest is start with building a conference centre
Mm,
with many bedrooms,
mm,
and bedrooms can be added,
mm.
and
Sorry.
then cabins can be built as well,
Mm,
and provided they don't have a kitchen, they're not classified as a dwelling, right?
right.
But the mobile home is a good idea as well. You know, I mentioned this truck that's on the poster
Mm,
at the local supermarket here. It's the size of a tiny home.
You've removed the Kingdom of Australia.
You can do all that if you wish.
Apparently wasn't relative to their group, you naughty boy.
Okay. All right.
so,
Does anybody want to have a seat here and talk? I've had enough.
yeah, right.
We've been going since about 8 o'clock.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. I think we've covered
Yeah.
a lot of information,
We have, yeah.
and I'm wondering if we should call it a night.
Yeah,
If anybody else wants to say anything.
yes.
And keep in touch. I think we can manage this situation if we work as a collective rather than individuals.
Mm.
I don't know how that's going to happen.
Mm. Well, I've written down all the books you recommended, so I'm looking forward to getting that Conversations with God. That sounds good.
I've got some of them on the bookshelf, but you're interested.
I'm still building up a rapport myself, but I can vouch for you.
Sorry?
Let me know how it goes with Lucas anyway. You're interested in knowing more I know.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Anyway, we might say good night.
Yep.
And thank you for all being on the call.
Yes.
And